This is the iPhone 13 mini, the smallest phone in the lineup that in my opinion is the underrated king of iPhones. And despite high praise, Apple has now discontinued from their current lineup. So if this is the newest mini iPhone that you can buy, and it's now 2 years old, how is it holding up in 2024? Has it gotten worse as it ages? Does the battery hold up? Or is the tech advancing in a way that the iPhone 13 mini just can't keep up? These are all questions that I got daily when using this phone for the past few years. So you probably think I'm crazy, right? Having the best of the best iPhone 15 Pro Max in hand, but then choosing to use the iPhone 13 mini. Who in their right mind would make that choice? But that's exactly what Apple wants you to think. So in a world where phones are getting bigger and bigger, and the larger phones are usually capable of more, it makes sense to want the best of the best. But due to the heavy weight of the phone, and the fact that the larger screen size doesn't really do anything more than the mini, except for, of course, more space between icons on your home screen, or more text viewable at once, it isn't really convincing enough to lug that phone around. Not when it's way heavier, and there's a perfectly great iPhone 13 mini that offers 90% of the features of a current iPhone in a fraction of the weight and the size. It quickly became clear to me that the Pro Max is a status symbol, and the only real benefit is the camera. Overall, the benefit to a phone this size is far greater than the benefits of a Pro Max. It's amazing to me how a phone this size just fits into your life without taking up space, and it always seems to make my quality of life better than a Pro Max. Let me explain. So this is not the best spec'd out phone that you can buy. The screen is just 60 Hz, and if you're coming from a 120 Hz display, you're going to notice the difference. In fact, it gets me every single time I do the switch. The bezels are also larger than current iPhones. The notch isn't larger than other 13s, but it feels like it due to an overall smaller display. But despite the obvious downsides to a phone this size, there's something special about it. In fact, after using this thing for the past 3 years, I've come to the conclusion that it might not be the phone that everyone wants, but it's the phone that everyone needs. More on that later. So let's put this into context. The phone in 2024 is now 3 years old, and at launch, it was the lowest end with the least features in the lineup of the iPhone 13s. Smaller battery, smaller cameras, smaller screen, obviously. But when you think of the functionality about what you actually do on your phone, Apple absolutely nailed it with this phone in a couple of ways. And those are MagSafe, screen size, and then Face ID. It comes with MagSafe built in, so you're able to use every iPhone accessory out there to charge your phone conveniently, meaning it doesn't matter that it's still using that Lightning port instead of USB-C. You can also still use MagSafe wallets or MagSafe battery packs to stay charged throughout your day if you are a power user. You're also still getting a full screen phone, no home button like on the SE or older gen phones, and that makes this phone feel really current compared to the SE. You're also getting Face ID for easy unlocking or payment with Apple Pay, and all of this backed by an A15 Bionic chip, which is the same processor in the iPhone 14 and 14 Plus, the iPad mini, and the Apple TV 4K. So all of this to say, Apple didn't have to go this hard on this one. When you add it up, all this tech means that the mini can do 90% of the tasks that the latest iPhone can. And there's something to be said about an iPhone that's 3 years old, still runs all the apps that my Pro Max can, doesn't trade off on any usability of the phone, and is still as reliable as it was on day one. So yes, 90% of the features are usable on this phone. But then what about that 10%, that sliver that might be missing from a newer phone? When I'm testing phones like this, I really want to see how well it holds up in the most basic, and then of course the most advanced settings. And throughout my testing, there are 3 clear things that this phone is lacking on. And those are battery life, sort of, 120 Hz display, which you'll really notice, and then the camera, it's just way worse. There's no other way to put that. It's not good. So I'm going to start with the camera because it is the most obvious loss of features here. I mean, is it just me or does every phone review feel like just a camera review now? And it's no secret that when you pack tech into a smaller form factor, you need to have some trade-offs, and Apple definitely chose the camera as the trade-off on the iPhone 13 mini. Don't get me wrong, it's got 2 cameras on the back, which together are capable of up to 5 times zoom, or down to 0.5 with the ultra-wide camera, all of which looks good, but only in perfect natural lighting conditions. When you take this thing into low light scenarios, that's where you really see the flaws of this thing. And the constant need for ideal lighting means that you'll often end up with bad looking photos that just aren't on par with what more current iPhones can do on the first try. This really is the one thing that frustrates me about the iPhone 13 mini, and I wish they did more to make a better camera here, because it's also the main reason that I ever switched back to the Pro Max throughout the year. It really feels like Apple made this phone for basic users, and then it just neglected the power users who might want to do more with an ultra-portable phone like an iPhone Pro Mini, if that existed. But even the more basic users would probably enjoy a much better camera on this thing. This camera is also capable of some newer features like portrait photos where it blurs the background, but without the LiDAR sensor, it's using software to artificially create that blur, which is going to make it look fake in almost every single case. The good news is that once you take the portrait photo, you can edit it after just like a pro, reselecting the focus point or changing the aperture for more or less blur. All in all, you can take decent photos with this thing, but it requires a lot more tampering with than a newer phone that can just take that shot on the first try and it's good to go. And if you are spending a lot more time on your phone, that brings me to the second point here, which is battery life. This is the question that every single person asks me about this phone. From friends to family to people on the street, the assumption from people is that this phone is not going to last you all day. And I'm here to say that's not actually the case. In fact, most of my time with this Mini, there was only 2 times where I actually needed to recharge this thing toward the end of my day. And that was primarily because of wireless CarPlay and probably too much time on TikTok. But to make it more practical for you to understand, the main thing that I monitor as I start using this phone is how long that it lasts me throughout the day, and then how much battery I have at the end of my day when I set my phone down on my charger. So the real screenshots I have here are 22, 14, and 8. This is the percentage I had at the end of the day with typical use. This is generally what you can expect to have left at the end of the day. That's with making regular phone calls without recharging during the day and general use. I do suspect that if you're into really intense tasks like gaming or a lot of video watching, a power bank, probably a solid investment to recharge. But even on the days where it wasn't quite making it, I found that plugging into wired CarPlay for short trips usually was enough to keep my phone going throughout the day without needing a power bank. And for those who want the real numbers, here's a 10-day average of my phone usage, with the lowest being 45% and the highest being 140%. And if you average that out, it leads to about 80% usage, which feels completely accurate to me, honestly. Is it 2-day battery life? Nope, not even close. But it's definitely enough for most people to get through the day. And all of this, by the way, is on a phone after 3 years and using 91% battery health. Anyone who tells you that the iPhone 13 mini can't make it throughout the day is using scare tactics, and in my experience, it's just not true. But the other thing that contributes to great battery life is something that I talked about last year in my review, and something that most people don't catch on to if they're just testing the phone for a week and not over a long period of time. And that is when you get this phone, something magical happens. Because the screen is so small, you naturally use it less. Now this surprises me every single time I come back to this phone, because technically with it being so small, it's much more portable, so you're happy to carry it around with you. The display is small enough to use it easily one-handed, so theoretically you should use it more, right? But the smaller screen also means that you don't want to spend a lot of time navigating complex sites. The lack of an always-on display means you aren't constantly bothered by it. I'm convinced a mini iPhone solves a lot of the problems in the world. And the smaller display also means less opportunity to steal your attention to keep you invested, all of which feeds into making this the perfect digital detox phone. When I first switch to this phone, the first thing I do is disable all notifications, remove social apps from my home screen, and set up glanceable widgets. All of this means that I'm only seeing what I want to see and not constantly getting notifications throughout the day. But on the flip side, the phone is still capable of using every app that the Pro Max can without delay or any performance issues. All running on this tiny compact phone that's nearly weightless compared to the Pro Max. I always forget I even have it in my pocket. The other plus is that I start using a lot more of my Apple ecosystem as a result of the smaller screen. So browsing the web, I now use my Mac or my iPad for the convenience of a full desktop. For videos, I often AirPlay to my Apple TV. And for some people, that doesn't really sound like a plus, but it makes my time on my apps more structured because I'm intentionally carving out time and going to another device for those actions versus just aimlessly scrolling on my phone. So my utilization of my other devices goes up, but my overall time on all devices goes down. So if I'm right about this phone and the iPhone 13 mini was such a powerhouse, perfect combination of design and then performance, why was it discontinued? And the answer is simple. We killed it. This is one of those phones where a lot of people praise it and think it's great, but then sales are saying people are opting to buy the larger phones. And like I said, it's the phone I think everybody needs as a digital detox, but not the phone that everyone actually wants. But then the other side to that problem is that the minis were doomed from the beginning because of Apple. Were they ever really committed to it? I've done a lot of videos on this phone, and most comments are from people that want a mini Pro iPhone with a better battery, better screen and refresh rate, better cameras, and Apple just didn't commit enough to make that phone. And then to keep the phone small, they compromised on those features and made a worse phone in the process. So will we ever see another iPhone mini? In a world where we're seeing a push for minimal tech like the new minimal phone and other small phones in 2024, maybe it's time for a mini to make a comeback. There's no current rumors for 2024, but it does look like a new iPhone SE could be coming in a similar form factor to the mini in 2025. I for one hope that Apple gives it a real try and makes a Pro mini, and I think it'll sell better than previous minis have. But let me know in the comments if you agree and you think Apple should make another mini or mini Pro. This test of going from the iPhone 15 Pro Max to the 13 mini has shown me that in an age where tech advances faster and faster, you don't actually need the latest phone. And I'm using that logic on the next few videos while I transition to an even older phone to see how it works in 2024.